Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So on today's video, we're going to be changing the wheel bearings on my GX470. Recently, I was driving the car and it's making this weird whining noise. It's kind of like a high pitch, not really a squeaking or anything. It's a very high pitched noise, especially when you're accelerating or decelerating. And that's a telltale sign of the bearings going bad. Since I don't know which side it's coming from, I'm assuming it's coming from the driver's side, but it could be coming from the passenger side. It's one of those whines where it kind of echoes and it's hard to tell. So on today's video, I'm going to go over how to change the wheel bearings. I'll go over all the parts you may need, as well as parts that you may not need, but it's optional since you're in there to change it out. So stay tuned. So the wheel bearings for the GX470 are the exact same wheel bearings that have been used on the four-wheel drive 4Runners, the FJ, and the Tacomas for the longest time. They all use the exact same hub and they're all interchangeable. They actually come in parts from the factory that you have to press together, and they're pretty expensive if you buy them here in the USA from the dealers in the US. One side can cost upwards of $500 or $600 just for the parts from the OEM. I did get these as aftermarket, but the bearings, the parts, and all that are actually OEM. I believe the person that sells these gets a lot of this stuff from Japan, which is a lot cheaper than buying it here domestically from the dealer for the exact same part, the exact same part number. I don't know why it's so much cheaper over there in Japan, but it is. So the bearing itself used to be a Koyo brand bearing that they used exclusively. About 10 years ago, they switched to NSK. So the current OEM used on all the Toyotas and everything that comes with it from the factory is an NSK, and this bearing right here is an NSK. I bought these from Yota Bearings online for 320 bucks for the both sides, which is a freaking bargain. I started trying to source just the bearing itself, the bolts, the little dust ring down here, and all this stuff, and it actually ended up adding to more than just buying it directly assembled from this guy shipped to your door. So I opted for that. Even if I did just buy this whole bearing right here and the bolts and everything, I still had to press the old hub out, reuse the hub that's all rusted and corroded on the vehicle now, and press it back in. Over here we get this brand new hub. Even though it's an aftermarket Chinese one, it's just a machine part that comes mass produced. It shouldn't be a big issue. There's really no moving parts on it. The studs are also aftermarket from China, so that's the only thing that's kind of questionable. Other than that, everything else on here is pretty much OEM. Yota Bearings also offers an aftermarket bearing version of this. It's about $100 cheaper than what we have here, but the only difference is you get a cheap non-branded bearing, so you don't even know who made it. It doesn't have NSK, it doesn't have Koyo. It could be a quality bearing from Japan, but I doubt it for the price. It's most likely a Chinese brand or a US domestic brand that's not shown on there as their brand, but that's an option too if you don't really care to pay the extra $100 or so for the OEM bearing. As far as all the build parts to get this put together, you need these 4 bolts right here. If you pressed it yourself, you could theoretically reuse the ones that came off the vehicle by taking those off and reusing them. You need a new dust shield right here. This is a dust shield as well as a seal that keeps the dust out of the bearing. If you don't replace that, you risk getting dust in there and damaging the bearing. You need this O-ring. You can't really see it right here, but it's tucked right there into that bearing. So this thing is an O-ring that keeps moisture out once you press it into the actual hub and the spindle of the vehicle. So you're going to need that. But other than that, this whole bearing assembly right here, this part that's kind of got this purplish color right here, is actually all one piece that comes with this bearing right here when you order it from the dealer. But yeah, you could tell that this part right here is a hardened metal just because of the coloration right there. That's being heated in the factory to get that coloration, and it's also a hardening process. So that's definitely an OEM part. The bolts you could tell are OEM by looking at the top of them. They should have an 11 on them. That's an OEM marking from Toyota, as well as this slight purple purple color that you see here, that's a thread locker that they kind of dry onto there. So it's a one-time use thing. Once you screw it on, you don't have to put a wet thread locker on there. It's already built into the thread. But like I said, after I priced out all these parts, I looked up this brand right here that they use, the SPK Made in China hub right here. This thing's $13 or $15 from Rock Auto for each side, plus all the parts for 320 bucks. That's a freaking steal, just because I had priced out these bearings shipped from Japan or from the UAE with the bolts, the seals and everything, and it ended up being $270 shipped to my door already, and that's without the hub. So once you factor in that hub, the press time, the actual shipping to get to my door, it's an actual bargain. And you know, this is a deal just to get it assembled so you can just throw it onto the vehicle. And it's actually cheaper, I believe, than buying one of these aftermarket ones from Rock Auto that's pre-assembled just like this, shipped to your door. This one, at least I know they have OEM bearings and pretty much mostly OEM parts except for the studs and the hub itself. As far as other parts that are kind of optional that you need for the project, you'll need this oil seal right here. So this oil seal is actually on the inside of the spindle and the hub. This one actually seals the actual drive axle to the hub to keep the moisture from getting into there past that O-ring and all that once you bolt it on. So this thing is an optional item. A lot of people don't replace this just because it's a pain in the ass to tap out, and then you kind of have to press it back in or rig some kind of press on the vehicle to pull it into the seat, or you have to take the spindle out and try to press it on your own press using some blocks or something to get it back in there. I'm gonna attempt to do this with some 2x4s and some other press kit items I have. The center of this is about 90 millimeters. Unfortunately, I don't have a 90 millimeter press or a 90 millimeter ring that fits into here. I thought I did with my kit, but it only went up to 82 millimeters. So I don't want to risk damaging the inside seal because the 90 millimeters hits it right here on the metal versus the 82, which hits it on the rubber, and I don't want to press that rubber. So I'd rather press it along the outer lip with a 2x4 to get it into the seat. But one of the things I saw on this, and I saw it online with all the different sellers that sell this thing, this is the only part I've ever really seen that Toyota has that's made in China. Look at that. So it's actually a made in China part. It's a seal, not very critical, but it is a seal. That's odd that it was sourced from actual China. But this thing does come with this silicone grease on it already. You can kind of see it through the envelope or the bag here. So that's a good thing there. It's got, you can see the little metal ring inside that kind of keeps this thing in there. But overall, it should be the same one that's on the vehicle now. I'm just weirded out that it's made in China. And this part, I definitely ordered it from Amayama, who always ships me OEM parts, and it's made in China. I've seen the ones from the sellers on eBay and online that sell the same part, and they all show that made in China too. So it's not a counterfeit part, it's an actual made in China Toyota part. In addition, these are other optional parts that you may need. Taking off your cap, if you even still have the cap on your vehicle, usually mangles it unless you're very careful. Some people kind of slowly get a flat head all around that and just slowly pry it out so they don't damage it, so they can use it. My particular vehicle, somebody, the last person that did the axles on here, did not put these things back. I figured they mangled it and they just left it off. In addition, I got the new drive axle bolts. I figure since I'm taking it out, I'm going to replace it. And I actually have another video during this process that I'm actually showing how to replace the axles with some GX470 ones. So if you want to check that out, I'll have a separate video on that. But for our video, I won't really show the details of that. But yeah, for that video, I also have a separate video kind of explaining why I went with GX460 shafts, as well as sticking with OEM, and rebuilding used OEM ones is a much better option than actually buying these cheap Chinesium axles that are gonna fail on you or break on you within a year or two. Over here, I went ahead, when I was ordering all this stuff from Amayama, that's where I got these right here, these nuts, because they've got this Amayama sticker. They actually source a lot of these kind of fastener parts from the actual manufacturer, the original OEM supplier in Japan. That's why they have this tag on them. That's not a Toyota tag, but it is an OEM part. I got the Cotter Pin. These were $1 each, which I probably could have just grabbed out of my box using some cheap China ones or some cheap normal ones I have in my case. These are the crown bolts that kind of protect this thing and hold that in. They actually come with an anti-corrosion on them seal on either, it's dipped in it, so it actually prevents any kind of corrosion and all that. I figure the factory ones that come from the factory also have this coating if it hasn't already been worn off or corroded away. But overall, these are all the minimum parts you really need to do. Really, the minimum part you need to change out that is right here. If you find damage on the seal, it's a good idea to change this out. All this other stuff over here is optional. You could reuse what you have or you're taking out. It shouldn't be a big deal as long as you tighten everything back up. You can get it all back on. So to do the axles today, I'm going to be using this Vivor socket kit right here. They sent this over to me to review and try out. So we'll go ahead and look over it and see what it comes with and what is useful for our project here. So as you can see, it comes with a whole array of impact drivers, the deep ones, and it comes with all the sizes you're going to need for most import vehicles to do all the axles and the big bolts and everything underneath the car, especially suspension, axle nuts, and all that stuff. For the GX, we're going to need a 35, so we've got the 35 right here, so that's perfect for the GX that we're going to be doing today. We have 34, 32 would be useful on the ISs and other vehicles I work on, as well as the 30. A 30 is another one that's used on some of the smaller Toyota vehicles, so we have that. If you guys are interested in the same kit, check out the links in the description to Amazon where you could pick these up for like less than $100 for this whole kit. So in order to change out the hub and take everything out here, first what we have to do is take apart the caliper. So the caliper's got two 17 millimeters back here. You want to go ahead and take those two 17 millimeters off right there. Kind of take the whole caliper off. You might have to push your pads apart a little bit so you could just swing it all out. And then take the two 10 millimeters out of here also, because your soft line and your hard line for your brakes is all attached right here. So you want to take that off so you can swing this thing away. Make sure you hang it from here with like a old clothes hanger or a ratchet strap or a bungee cord that can support the weight of this caliper. Just hang it up here so it's out of the way so we can do all our work down here. All right, this thing's a 4 millimeter back here. So we want to go ahead, get this in here and screw the sensor off so we get this thing out of the way. Wiggle it out, it's in there, and just want to pop it off the harness here. All right, now we got all the stuff out of the way up here. Go ahead, take the cotter pin out. This thing's definitely not an OEM cotter pin that's this long, and it folds over like that, because you saw the OEM one is short, just folds over barely just to the tip there. We'll go take the cap off. So this cap has got that blue coating. That's definitely OEM reused. This is a 35 millimeter. I showed you guys earlier that Vivor kit that I'm using. So we want to make sure we get it on there. We got it on reverse. Just shoot it off. So that makes quick work of it with this DeWalt. So now that we've got the nut off and everything, I'll go ahead and get the wrench right here and kind of break all these bolts loose so that way they're loose. And then once we swing it out, then we can pull all this thing out. There's a 19 down here, so we'll go ahead and just shoot this off with the impact. So as you wiggle it around and kind of move this thing, you can get the axle all the way through. And once you get it through, you have clearance to do your work. So you can kind of just push this thing off to the side. Do that without messing any of the seals up. So once we pull the axle out, we can see that seal back here that we end up having to replace because you want to inspect that to make sure there's no damage. It doesn't look like there's much damage or anything to the seal, but we'll see once we pull this whole axle assembly and this hub assembly off to see what condition it is behind there. All right, so now that I pulled the axle out of the way so we could have more room to work, I'm gonna go ahead and take apart these right here. So the trick is to turn all these things out. I don't think you could turn them all the way out. You kind of have to pull it out a little bit and then keep on going, so that way you could get your wrench out, especially if you're using the gear wrench, and then you're going to end up getting stuck. We just got everything out. All right, once we pull that hub out, you can see all that black crap in here. That's actually the old seal right here that got deteriorated inside. So it's just all the little bits of seal that's in there from that aftermarket axle. So definitely needs to be replaced. Good thing I have that replacement for that. So what you want to do right now, since I have it in here, I'm gonna go ahead and just tap it through, and then I'm gonna try to press it from the backside forward using a 2x4 and like a bolt or something to try to use as a makeshift press on the actual vehicle. This is a 90mm hole to press in, like I showed you guys earlier with the seal. All right, to do this work, I actually put those 19mm back in so this thing's nice and solid so I don't mess up anything. I'm using this cup right here as an 82mm. Since I don't care about this rubber, I'll just go ahead and just use it, but I'll just center it as much as I can and just tap it through. So it pops right through. So you can see the condition of this thing. The thing was all torn up. On this side, it actually looked in decent condition. It was on the inside that was kind of messed up, that had all that crap that was building up in the rubber and everything that was in there. So back on this side, I want to go ahead and clean it all up with some degreaser. Make sure all the surfaces are clean, wipe it down, and then any corrosion or anything in there, you just want to go ahead and hit it with like a Scotch-Brite just to shine it all up and clean it all up. All right, we got that made in China seal that came pre-oiled. Go ahead and take it out and just try to test fit it in here after I cleaned everything up. I cleaned it with Scotch-Brite with some degreaser and everything. Got it all shiny again. So we want to get this thing. So on the inside, there's a thick layer of grease that kind of keeps everything greased up on there. So you don't want to touch that. All right, so I found my solution. So I've got the wood block here. I found one of my old edger blades right here that I had laying around. That's a perfect fit right there on this side to pull it through and hold it. Then I have that rod from my bearing pushing kit or that other press kit. So this thing basically has bearings and everything on it, so it can spin freely once it's on this thing. So we'll just go ahead, put this thing through, put the seal through, and try to pull it and press it through. So we're gonna go ahead, fit this thing back onto there, center it as best we can. We want to make sure it's evenly kind of pressed through, or because it goes in one side, but you want to make sure it's evenly distributed across the whole thing. Got it in place. We'll get the shaft through here first. This thing. Once we get that through, we want to make sure we kind of press it good. My little blade, any kind of piece of metal would do, but this is what I had. This is pretty hardened steel, so it's not going to bend on us, hopefully. And then we got to just channel this thing back on here onto the threads. So it's going to take a while to get this thing all the way through. I think it's a 21. Let me go get a correct wrench. All right, we got that thing pressed in. Check, make sure it's all even on the front, and then also on the back, just make sure that you got that thing in, no gaps, nothing. So everything looks good all around on this thing. So we're pretty much good here. So we go ahead, put all that stuff back up front and go ahead and finish this install on this side. All right, so we got our new hub here. Before we start, I'm gonna put a little bit of silicone grease around that O-ring right here, that seals right here. That way we don't get any moisture or anything inside this pot, which will cause corrosion to the bearing. So we'll go ahead and do that. Just as an FYI, what I took out of here was the same NSK that we're putting back in. So this thing never had a coil bearing on this one. All right, so now that we got everything ready, go ahead and just put this thing on here. So it doesn't matter the orientation, this thing is square. So as long as you get the bolts lined up, it should be good. Just go ahead, we might have to lift it a little bit, just get it past the lip. And then go ahead and just start turning these things by hand to get the threads in. You know what I forgot? I'm standing here. I forgot to put the dust shield on. Good thing I didn't turn them all the way in. I also forgot to put a little bit of general purpose grease around this guy too. Forgot all about that. Get the dust shield on. Get your orientation. So you see that marking right there, that's the footprint on the back side. Just kind of get it in place. There's also little dots or little dowel pin dots that kind of hang it there. So we'll just leave it here before we get the other. All right, so one of the things that makes it a little bit easier is once you do is you kind of leave it hanging a little bit by sitting right here in the axle, and then you screw it about halfway in, and then once you get it halfway in and it's flush, then you kind of pop it in with the seal and everything into the groove, and then you kind of keep on going by hand. But this thing is kind of tedious to get it all into here. But once we get it into here, then we can go ahead and torque everything down. I don't believe these things require much torque as far as these bolts that go into the hub here. This one up here is like 180 something foot-pounds on the front end, but so the torque spec on these 4 bolts for the hub is only 59 foot-pounds, so that's like next to nothing compared to everything else on here. So like I said earlier, unless you have one of those adapters that you could put a torque wrench on something like this, we just kind of got to eyeball it and just tighten it as much as we can. That's the wrong way. And then once we put on the caliper bolts are 91 foot-pounds, but all these measurements and all these torque settings, I'll go ahead and post them up on this video as I'm talking about them, so that way you guys know exactly what it is and you can see it on the screen. All right, that's perfectly tight. So next thing we gotta do, put the rotor back on, put the caliper back on, and kind of put everything back the way we took it off and tighten everything back up. The torque specs on this lower ball joint, these 219s, is crazy. It's like 166. This one right here is 173. Both of these, I don't have a torque wrench that's big enough. This thing only goes up to 150. So I'm gonna just go ahead and torque it to 150 and just shoot it with the impact after that just to make sure it's tight. But that, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish the other side as a time lapse. If I run into anything that's a little bit different than this side, I'll show you guys that. It's basically the same as this side, but we'll go over there and just show that anyways. So we went ahead and took this side out. You can see the seal on this side and the CV axle and everything was much cleaner. There's no damage on this side, so maybe this is the side that's not bad. The other side might be the bad bearing or the one that's going out, and maybe it wasn't spinning properly. That's why we had all that debris and crap in there from the seal, but this one's in much better condition on the inside. All right, there, popped it right out. As you saw, I popped that seal out for the hub right here, and on this side it was much cleaner than the driver's side. Even when you look at both sealed side by side, you can see that's the side on the driver's side that was suspected the bad side, where we had the broken down pieces of seal right there. And this side is the clean side on the passenger that I just took off. You can see it still has the original OEM grease, like on the new seal right there. It hasn't even been disturbed or used up really over the years. But yeah, if you look closely on both sides, it is the same original one from the factory. They both look in the same age and the same condition. When you look at the dirt accumulation and just the overall backside condition, it's just that other side where it meets up with the CV. I suspect it's from the last time that someone changed that CV to those aftermarket ones. They probably put it in there and kind of messed it up when they seated it. But if you look closely, this is a Koyo brand right there. So it says Koyo right here. And then on this side, you can see the part number. And then on the opposite side, it says Koyo also. So here's that one on the passenger side I took off, and here's an original brand new OEM with that grease line right there. You can see it's almost the same grease, never been touched. The only reason that's been touched is I touched it to see if it was hard or soft, and it was actually soft. If we look at the back side of this has got the exact same part number, seal, the Koyo brand, just like I showed you a second ago on that old one that we took out. So it's definitely a Japanese seal, but maybe they have a manufacturing facility in China, or the actual metal part was made in China and assembled with a Koyo Japanese seal. So we'll go ahead and just clean this thing out, rub it down with some super clean just to clean all the dirt out of it. And then once we do that, I'll just clean it up with a little scuff pad just to make sure we get all corrosion and anything out of here before we put the new seal in. Nice and easy on that quick press right there with the wooden block. So yeah, if you guys have to do this, definitely just leave it on the vehicle, pull it through instead of trying to take it off and following the service manual, doing it off the car on a press. There's no need to put a real press on this. It pulls in pretty easily with that method I did. So here's one of the things to watch out for when you do this without having the hub off of it. As you can see, I got it in there, but the seal right here kind of popped out a little bit, and you can see the rubber and the wire that supports that rubber kind of off shape. So I'm gonna have to pull it back out, make sure that thing's seated back correctly, and then try to get it back in. So I just popped it out slowly and just pushed it back in, and that lip rolled around correctly on the actual hub and spindle. So we're good there. All right, got everything back together, brand new hub. As you can see, the cap is a big pain in the ass to put on, but we got that thing on. So everything's back to OEM and good quality again. Hey guys, thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video on changing out that wheel bearing on the GX470. As you can see, it's a pretty straightforward and easy process, very easy to do as long as you have some basic tools. I think the hardest part was putting in that new seal, just because that's a maintenance item, and obviously on this side right here, it was a failure. On the other side, it probably could have gone a couple thousand more miles without no issues. If you guys found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to your channel, go ahead and subscribe to your channel. Turn on bell notifications to get notified every time I upload a video. For all these different projects, if I can do it, you guys can do it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.